You're listening to the Business of Glamping and Unique Holiday Rentals, Episode 6. This is where we love to talk about tips, tricks, and inspirations for anyone hosting guests in unique structures like tree houses, cabins, hideaways, canvas structures, and anything in between. In fact, anything in the hospitality industry that's a bit special and very unique. We tackle the A to Z of turning your passion into profits because building a successful business takes time and effort. So I share proven strategies to help you get there faster. Today, I'm asking the owner of a food delivery service how they intend to blend their Treehouse glamping plans with health and wellness. So, let's get started. Glamping and unique holiday rentals are surging in popularity with the growing desire of customers to book holidays that deliver an experience. They are also the new business of choice for those wanting to improve their work-life balance. So how do you build a strong business like this that gives you the life you need and a great investment? I'm Sarah Riley and I want to share what I've discovered after being immersed in this industry for over 20 years to inspire you to find out more about what's going on. Welcome, this is the Business of Glamping and Unique Holiday Rentals. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Business of Glamping and Unique Holiday Rentals. I cannot quite believe it's episode 6 already. Where has the time gone? Today I'm talking to Karen Baldock, who is the director of Food Joy. Now this is a company that's passionate about sustainability and healing the planet through food. Karen herself is a lover of the outdoors, loves snowboarding and gardening, and has 2 young children. She has a lot on her plate. However, they are now exploring the possibility of starting a glamping business that will work harmoniously with their sustainable and organic food company. And the plan is that the Treehouse Glamping Company will help to support their food business and vice versa. Now, this is all wrapped up in health and wellness, and that's very interesting because the wellness tourism industry is on the increase and those in the know are taking advantage of this. Recently, it was reported that the wellness travel is expected to generate $563 billion in earnings, according to the Global Wellness Institute. It grew 10.6% between 2013 and 2015, while the rest of the global economy shrank by 3.6%. Now, those statistics are very interesting indeed. So, glamping and unique holiday rentals is ideally placed to take advantage of this increase because it allows us to connect to nature and the land and inspires us to focus on each other and what we're doing in our everyday lives. It helps us reassess and readjust and to consider our lifestyle outside of our holiday and what we can do to improve our health. This isn't necessarily about living longer. This is about living a better and healthier and happier life while we're actually alive. And to connect to nature in that environment allows us to make those assessments. As a qualified health coach and a stroke survivor, and also as someone who worked for many years in a family whole food business, I'm very aware of how being in nature can help us reflect, recover, and adapt to some of the more negative impacts on our health of the modern day. And glamping really can give us some of the things we need to do that in a way that we're happy with, in comfort and in style. So it was very interesting for me to speak to Karen and to hear about what she and her husband are planning for the future. And I'm sure it's going to inspire you too. So without further ado, let's head over to the interview. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased today to introduce you to Karen, who is the director of Food Joy, who we met in California at the Glamping Summit very recently. And so I asked Karen to come on the show to talk about what she's doing at the moment, which I find inspirational, and hopefully you will too, which is about how she's matching up what she's already doing with her sustainable food company, matching it up with glamping. So welcome to the show, Karen. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well, and thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm absolutely delighted to talk with you today.
Oh, it's wonderful that you took the time to do it. And I'm really excited because I met you in person in California, and I was really inspired by what you and John, your husband, were talking about how you're going to be building your business and how you're thinking through as well your detail and how you're allowing that to evolve and change as things happen. But I was particularly interested in something that you said at the Glamping Summit, which was how conversations that you'd had really kind of changed and molded what you're now thinking of doing. So be really interesting for me if you would explain that a little bit more about some of the aha moments that you had at the Glamping Summit.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. So John and I made the decision to go to Long Beach just because we're really committed to this, and we said, okay, if we're doing this, let's immerse ourselves, and let's go to the biggest thing there is. And the timing was just right. We'd been kind of on our path for a few months when we found out that the summit was coming up, and so going to that, I think, really was a pivotal moment for us for a couple of reasons. So one is that a lot of this, we've still had to carry on our other jobs while we're in the planning phases. And I have been able to be more active as my business is sort of seasonal. So when the growing season ended here in Maine, it gave me a lot more time to focus on this. And John has been a little bit more out of the loop because he's been having to bring home the bacon still with his building business. So going to that glamping summit really pulled him in and showed him that this isn't just like a harebrained scheme that we have in our minds. It's real. It's a real industry, amazing things are happening in the industry. Intelligent people are doing it successfully. People are thriving at it. And so I would say that was one big takeaway for us, just generally speaking, was the perspective and the reassurance that we got on the glamping industry. Another kind of nice thing that came out of the Global Glamping Summit for us was just the networking. I mean, to be able to talk to all sorts of like-minded, glamping experts who were so happy to share very useful advice. I'm a big fan of, I used to have a tendency towards reinventing the wheel a little bit with every endeavor I did. And it's been nice to realize over the years that you can stand on the shoulders of giants. A lot of people have done what you're doing or similar things before it. So connect with them, work with them, learn from them, and then build on that with your own unique vision. And so being able to speak directly with those giants, so to speak, was really beneficial, and make all sorts of contacts and get all sorts of useful advice. So the networking piece was huge for us. But those are both sort of, the perspective and the networking are both sort of just general things that came out of it. In terms of more exciting aha moments, I think we had a few epiphanies there that were really inspiring for us. So we had, for example, I guess off the top of my head, one of those was that there seems to be a theme running through glamping of a tension between technology and the glamping experience, right? Are you going to offer Wi-Fi? And of course, there was a session all just about this at the summit. And we're very, familiar with that tension. We're big, slow life people. I got rid of my cell phone as a lifestyle choice in 2014. And so obviously I'm coming at things from that perspective. And to have the opportunity to really explore that in more mental detail, to think about what that tension means, gave us some huge aha moments in terms of realizing that technology really is an addiction in today's society, and that part of what we may end up doing is using strategies to think of it like, how can we still, if we're dealing with what is essentially an addiction for folks, how can we, cater to the useful parts of technology that people need, but also offer them an alternative in a way that is still, that shows them that there's a whole other world out there that it's easy to miss if you're too, connected, if you're too digitally logged in and too distracted in that way. So that was a fun aha moment for us, the technology piece. And even just little things that we learned, like filling in, ADA regulations as an example. It sounds kind of boring, but that's nonetheless something that you have to deal with. And I knew about them, and I'd done my own research, but then we had a nice session where just all of the details I needed were handed to me on a silver platter, and all of the sorts of things that I was trying to arduously research in the background. All these types of gap filling experiences were wonderful at the summit.
I love what you said there about how you're going to be using strategies to help people disconnect, which I think is lovely, because you're putting it back, the power back to them, saying, it would be so beneficial for you to do this, but we're going to think about strategies to help make that easier for you. And I think that's lovely. And yeah, the regulation session was brilliant. I sat through that too, and I can understand how that would have been very helpful. So quite mind-boggling actually, and eye-popping and dropping a little bit of the regulations that are there. So yes, to have that support and make those connections in that environment, so you can actually talk through how it actually happens on the ground for the people already, developing these businesses. I'm sure that would be very, very useful for you. And I think that's great that you found it so useful to actually attend the summit. And I do too. And as you said, the standing on the shoulders of giants, it's so lovely as well to learn from those people who are so successful in this industry, and to find out from them, because you're right, they share so openly and are so generous with their knowledge as to what exactly has been the biggest leader to their success and what they recommend that works. And if you have a strategy, then just to talk through that strategy with them, and they can either say, well, yes, you're going in the right direction from my experience, or maybe you need to think about this. And yes, I think it's incredibly useful. Some of the people that I met there as well, I had exactly the same thing, even though I've been in this game for a very long time. But to be able to talk through those things is very helpful for everyone, I think. So tell me a little bit more about you and your situation. So where you live and what you're currently thinking of doing.
Sure. So my husband, John Bolduc, and I are going in on this venture together. This represents a transition for both of us out of our previous careers, but kind of building on those previous careers. So he, of course, was a builder, and then I have an agriculture and food systems background, and this venture would combine them. So we live in Auburn, Maine, USA. So for those unfamiliar with U.S. and its geography, that's the northeasternmost corner of the United States, the very tippy top northeast. It's a cold climate. We do have a warm season though. And so what we're planning is basically a treehouse glamping accommodation with a focus on slow food, and also through another theme is just kind of rejuvenation through natural rhythms. So using cooking and the main seasons and the day and night cycles as a way to help guests kind of get back on that pulse of natural cycles and rejuvenate.
So what do you mean by slow food? Is that seasonal?
Great question. So by slow food, I just mean food that is whole food that is cooked from scratch. And so it definitely, like throughout the seasons, it will change what's available. But in Maine, we have to eat just like everyone else. And so even in the winter when there's no growing season. So we're pretty clever, and we've in Maine and in the Northeast, and I'm sure in lots of northern regions, people develop strategies on how they're going to eat locally. Of course, if you just go to the supermarket, you can get whatever you want, but we've got storage, right? So you can store squashes in storage in the root cellar. You can do canning and pickling. You can have greenhouses and hoop houses for right throughout the snowy winter for cold season greens like kale and chard and things like this. All sorts of strategies to have some offerings on the back side of the calendar as well. But with those whole slow food ingredients, I think there's been a real loss of knowledge about how to cook with whole foods. And that's kind of, I think, what's meant by, slow food and slow cooking. And so part of what we've done with with my venture previous to this, Food Joy, is try to reintroduce people to cooking in a really accessible way. It makes me sad to think that there are folks out there because they watch the cooking channel and it looks like cooking is this feat that's only for, the gourmet elite chefs of the world. And I don't know anything about cooking. I couldn't possibly do that myself. I think cooking is really critical to a well-balanced life, and it can certainly be fancy and gourmet, and you can get as fun as you want with it, but even just basic cooking skills are something that I would love to think that everyone felt that they had access to. And so for those that have wanted that and felt they don't have it, that's what Food Joy was created to do, is to make it more accessible, make it more affordable, make it simpler. And so to that end, we created a meal kit locally. So we have our own farm, and then we bought in produce and meat from other farms and assembled it into essentially kind of like the Blue Apron or these other national meal kit services. We assembled our ingredients into kits and gave that out to people. Basically, I drove it around and delivered it to their doorstep in little old school porch coolers, kind of like old milkman style. And we had a great response to that program. People really loved it. But frankly, we live in a sort of a depressed demographic, financially speaking, in Lewiston, Auburn. And so I think it was a challenge making the finances of that program work. And we said, look, this is good. It's helping people, but it's not surviving on its own. So how can we take this slow food concept of teaching people how to cook and embed it in something new? And so that's where the glamping idea was born. And I think that, so we'll probably take a slightly different spin on it with the glamping. I think we're going to be catering to a much different demographic than we did with Food Joy. But our hope is that if we can make sort of a more gourmet version and a fun version and deliver it actually to the Treehouse accommodations themselves, so that our guests have the opportunity to, in their fully equipped kitchens, do some nice slow cooking during their stay. They certainly don't have to. It'll probably be an add-on, and it will probably only be one meal a day, so you can still get out and experience the restaurants of the region and what Maine has to offer outside of your treehouse. But the idea that you yourself could just cook a delicious meal once a day and use that to help pace your life, that's, I guess, a very long answer to what we mean when we talk about slow food.
Oh, I love it. And so, I mean, part of that thing of getting back in touch with nature and getting back in touch with the food you're eating and where it's coming from and all of those things, and how you're talking there about seasonal, and that also goes in line with day and night, and whether we're sleeping at the right times, whether we're rejuvenating ourselves, and it's all interconnected. It's kind of part of one big system. So I love that you're bringing it all together as part of a guest experience. And are you going to be offering some kind of training or coaching or anything like that around the food?
Yeah, so probably there's likely to be two phases. In the beginning, we're likely to structure our meal kits just the way that Food Joy did, because I've experienced doing that and it worked fairly well. So that was not hands-on training or classes, but rather I designed the recipes to be very simple and very accessible, but still very delicious. So we would include with the kit like less than one page, less than 5 steps, simple instructions on how to create this meal, and you would have all the ingredients you need to do it. Very similar to, like I said, to the national meal kits, but just locally sourced and with a little bit more focus and celebration of our local ingredients and what we have here in Maine. So in the beginning, likely to have the actual recipe card. We call them dinner maps because a recipe sort of implies you're just making one thing, and that can be sort of daunting, I think, when you're cooking dinner, that you have a recipe for the roast chicken and a recipe for your beans and a recipe for your, rice, pilaf, or whatever. So we would make a dinner map, which just kind of looked holistically at the whole meal, and so that it worked out all the timing for you, so you didn't have to think about timing, and it would just say, okay, look, prep these vegetables first. Then step 2 would be get your oven preheated and get your meat roasting, and etc. So kind of looking at that all together was the dinner map, and that would be how we'd probably package it at first. And down the road, though, we have thought about introducing a phase 2, where once we get more established and are have a little bit more time to devote to things like that, we could probably offer some experiential classes, or even invite guest chefs in from the area to do sessions with our guests.
Yeah, and I'm also kind of sitting here really curious, as the director of Food Joy, how did you start thinking and being interested in the world of glamping? I mean, what's attracted you to it?
Sure. That's a good question. I think I've tried to remember exactly where I first heard about glamping. It wasn't that long ago. But when I did, I think that for me, the attraction was really, instantly. I've always loved being outside, and found that I get much more in tune with myself and with what's going on around me when spend more time in nature. So I've always loved the outdoors. That was an attraction. And then, of course, we live here on some acreage in Auburn, Maine, that has beautiful natural features. We've got a babbling brook that runs right through our through the back property here, and it's just very inspiring to spend time down there. So I've always thought, boy, wouldn't it be nice to share this area with others? And then to realize that there was this whole industry going on that sort of made that much more accessible. I mean, that's been a theme that's run through my life, is like, okay, cooking, I know people want to do it, but it seems so inaccessible to them. They don't have the skills, the ingredients are too expensive. How can I make it more accessible? And likewise, I feel like camping is such a rugged sport. And I grew up I did an Explorer post. It's actually a branch of the Boy Scouts. It's co-ed. And so when I was younger, high school, and I loved that. And we would go outside and do these high adventure hikes and things. And I thought, well, how could, that's such a rugged thing. And I like it, but I'm a pretty hardcore person. And I think you have to be a little bit rugged and not mind, digging holes and this sort of thing to go camping. So that same theme of making things more accessible, glamping, I think, really appealed to me in that way. It's like, okay, this is how we can help folks not be so scared of camping. Let's make it a little bit easier for you. Let's smooth it over a little bit, and you can experience nature. And likewise, I'm going to smooth over the rough edges of cooking for you, make that a little bit more accessible for you, so that you can enjoy yourself. So those two aspects, to me, being outside in nature and then potentially being able to integrate the food theme with it, that was really appealing to me. And then I think it was also, to speak to my husband's interest, it was a really natural fit for both of us, because John is a very talented builder, and we're both very hands-on people. And so instantly he was thinking about, when I mentioned that idea to him, he was excited to think about, what sort of structure we could build. And, Treehouse really intrigued us, because we love the idea of sort of releasing your earthbound encumbrances and being high up in the arms of a tree. It's an uplifting experience. We both had tree houses as kids, and loved that. So that is, I think, what really pulled us in towards it. And when we started thinking about it, it was just so exciting. We were like, hey, we could have our gourmet meal kits delivered to the tree houses, and we could have these moss covered paths to walk barefoot in the summertime, and we'll link into local snowshoeing trails. And we fell in love with the idea right away, and had all sorts of fun, inspirational talks about it, and knew that we just had to go forward with it.
Oh, sounds amazing. I want to come. It really sounds lovely. And when you say there how you want to open it up to everyone and make it more accessible, help them experience nature, but also while smoothing the rough edges. And that is bang on why I started Inspired Camping, because my actual motto is smoothing the edges of roughing it, about that whole thing of open up the outdoors to people who, rightly, they just want to have a bit of comfort. They don't want to be sleeping on hard floors and being cold. They want to be warm, but they want to be in nature too. So if we can help them access that, but whilst, making it more comfortable for them, then brilliant. And I love how you're thinking it through from the guest perspective. And I'm really interested, has your idea developed much since you first started coming up with this? How have you moved through this and developed your ideas so far?
Yeah, sure. So I think, originally it definitely has evolved and changed a little bit. I think the core idea has stayed the same since we first started talking about it. But I guess there was one, like, to speak to more aha moments that happened at the conference. It was actually when we spoke with you there. You gave a great reminder to me about the customer focus. I have previously had a tendency in my life to, I've got these grandiose ideas about how the world should be, and then it's very easy to want to project that onto the world and say, okay, well, you need to cook more, you need to spend more time in nature. But the world doesn't, let's face it, respond to being told what to do. People have their own agendas, and that needs to be honored. And so when John and I were speaking with you there at the summit, you mentioned, because I think I said something along the lines of, I just think people need to slow down. And then you kind of stopped me, saying, well, but think about it from your customer's perspective. Do they want to slow down? And I do think that our customers will want to slow down, and that is what will draw them there. But I think nonetheless, it's critical to be so cognizant of that difference, that it's about what they want and catering to that, and not about how I believe the world should be. And hopefully there's some sort of, tie in there that my ideas of how the world should be maybe offer a unique perspective to those folks already craving that, and the two synergize in the middle. But to think about the customer's perspective has changed a little bit, how we think we'll approach things, and the types of amenities that we'll offer that we might not have been focused on before. So having that real shift to the customer focus has evolved our vision a little bit. And then the way that we've kind of moved through things, I guess, to speak to that piece of the question, at first it was just discombobulated ideas and late night chat sessions, and the occasional, we have a 2 and a 3-year-old. So when we get a rare date night, it would just consist of us just downloading to each other about what is this going to look like? How are we going to do this? And so it was very overwhelming actually in the beginning. But I'm a fairly organized person. All my family teases me that I'm so big about spreadsheets. I love to put everything on a spreadsheet. And so I said, all right, let's try and bring a little bit of structure to this. So I developed a timeline, and the timeline has evolved and changed as we've moved along. But basically trying to hit on the key things and give myself and John rough deadlines to speak to the different pieces of all of these moving parts that have to come together, because it can be very overwhelming. And for me, when I put that down on paper, it made it much easier to say, okay, it's just a matter of these steps, and we just go through the steps and take it one step at a time. So like, for example, so far I'm looking at my timeline spreadsheet, and I've got it with one nice feature about Google Sheets now, is it allows you to put check boxes in. I've wanted that for 10 years, and finally they have check boxes, so I can say, yes, check, I did my business research. Step 1, I took Inspired Camping's or Inspired Courses glamping course. I did a scan of the local competition, but now, of course, increasingly I'm realizing that it's really not local competition, that if you're listing on Glamping Hub or these international sites, it's really international competition, so you have to look at the big picture. But we did that. We drew up a business model canvas, which I don't know if you're familiar with that tool, but it's if you aren't, Google it. It's a lovely tool that it's just a way to, on one page, kind of visually construct the 9 moving parts of any business model so that you can quickly identify gaps in it and say, okay, well, this is really what the business would be about, and we'd have to think about this. So we canvassed our glamping treehouse accommodation idea. Then we kind of fleshed out a little bit more detail, tried to get on paper just some rough specs, like how big are we picturing these tree houses? I mean, there is a wide variety of, when you say tree house, it does not mean one thing. It can mean many, many things, and it can be huge. Like, for example, we realized right away that neither of us particularly cared for what's known as an elevated cabin that some people call a tree house, but it's basically just like a big luxury house that is elevated, 3 or 4 feet off the ground, maybe through trees, maybe through posts. But essentially, it's just a house. And we really both were excited about the idea of doing a true tree house that doesn't just tolerate the trees, but honors the trees and is high up in the air, probably more than 8 feet. So we wanted to kind of rough out those specs. So that was a step we went through, kind of getting a little bit clearer about that vision. Of course, it can't be real detailed until you have your site picked out, but we tried to at least get as close as we could to bring some more life to that. The summit was, of course, a checkpoint, which we did. And so now our next steps are basically, we're knee deep in the land search right now. Here on our farm, we've got 10 acres, but most of it is pasture, and it's not really ideal for what we want to do. We'd like the idea of getting a lot of acreage that has, there's so many beautiful brooks running through this area of central and southern Maine. And so we'd really like to have, it's critical to us to have that babbling brook feature. So we've been doing an exhaustive land search and doing a lot of bushwhacking lately through these various properties to find the right site, and so much amazing natural beauty along the way. I mean, it's really a fun process to do the land search, but we're deep in that, and we can find the right parcel and purchase it. All of this has been happening concurrently with me writing the business plan, but that is really my next thing that I have to complete before we can move forward. Of course, to get funding, you've got to have your business plan lined up. So that's kind of like, those are our 2 big ones right now, is working through our marketing, our competition, our financials, our summary of what we're doing, and finding the land. And then later on, our next steps that we've outlined, I mean, who knows, I might be missing tons of things because this is my first stab at it. I've never done it. But what we have planned for the next steps is just to sit down with code enforcement and the fire department in whatever town we land in, which we think we have a front runner site now that we're very excited about. And so we'll sit down with those local authorities and just, give them a general idea of what we're planning on doing, make sure that it's okay, and start to get some construction numbers from treehouse builders. John, like I said, is a builder, but we've decided that there are enough competent treehouse specific builders that we want him to take like an auxiliary role and a help, a subcontracting role, essentially, like he's there to learn and help. But we would like to have a professional treehouse builder be the one in charge, GoProing the land, that's kind of on our to-do list of steps. Once we find the land, we just want to buy GoPro. I'm talking about those little cameras that you can set up and just, record the details of what's going on with the land and what it looks like as it evolves and changes shape as you build on it. So we want to, either time lapse that process or GoPro it, something like that. And then it's just a matter of launching, sites, designing the website and launching it and getting everything ready to launch. We're planning, I don't know if it's the right amount of time, but we're planning on, after we build, just giving the land 3 months to kind of settle and regroup before we actually try and have people staying there. I think it needs a little, it'll obviously develop more patina over the years that will be better and better. But we feel like at least a few months just for the land to recover and not look like it, there's building materials and, sawdust still lying around. So that's kind of an overall, summary of how we're moving through this process. And I'm new. I don't know if you never know how it's going to work out, but at least we've got a plan. And
You
so
have a plan, and that's so much more than a lot of people do. And the great thing is, they're hearing about everything you've got in place, is that you're really thinking it through, and you're structuring it out, and you're doing it in the right order. So I also love the idea about how you're going to let the land settle. It depends on the time of year, of course, because sometimes of the year it will recover much quicker than others. And so, especially if you're in a cold climate, I don't know if it's very wet in Maine, but in the UK, if there's a lot of movement on the land during the wet times, then there's a lot of the earth is turned up and turned over, and it becomes boggy. And yes, totally think that's a great idea. And we do a lot of paths and decking and things like that in the UK to help with that, to help keep people to paths, so it allows the rest of the land to recover. But yeah, and the whole thing there, you were talking about your timeline and your project management. That's a great tool to use. And I love using the tool of, when you're developing your timeline, you start from your end point. So your end point is that you have a successful business, and you work back from there to add in the times that you have to do key things, and key things particularly that are reliant on other key things to go through. And it's a really great tool for being able to cut down something that seems very overwhelming when you look at it as a whole thing, to step-by-step actions that you need to take that will help you kind of break it down. And it definitely seems less overwhelming when you take that approach. And well done for doing that. That's fantastic. And I'm sure that you've found that kind of reassuring to see it in those kind of steps, rather than always thinking about it in that kind of big, overwhelming manner.
It is. I think you can shut yourself down if it's just all a jumble of ideas in your head. It's like, it's so exciting, but it's so overwhelming that at least for me, everyone, processes things different. But for me, I would just shut down. So It's just been a survival strategy, and it's worked so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm exactly the same, which is why I timeline everything and I project manage everything. But that's my background training. So I kind of, that's what I always fall back on. That if I'm feeling like I'm not coping with something, I'll fall back on my training around that, because it's just reassuring, and it helps me break things down into, those steps that make it seem so much easier. But again, I'm curious, who do you think your ideal guest is going to be for?
So this is important, and it may shift a little, but right now we envision this primarily as basically like the rejuvenation headquarters for primarily couples, people who are leaders, who are game changers, who are nonconformists, and who do a lot of who work hard in the world, and who may feel burned out and exhausted by life's fast-paced daily grind, either from executive jobs or from other life's routines, who just really want to zoom out and get some perspective on life through their vacation or holiday, as you might say, to get in touch with kind of their primal sensual selves. By sensual, literally meaning all the senses, seeing things, touching things, tasting things. I think there's a real value in that, in getting in touch with that side that helps people, at least it helps me, and I believe it can help others to remember why they bother with any of this life. I mean, there's a lot of joy in life, but there can also be a lot of strife, and there can also be a lot of disenchantment, particularly when you are a very, for those of us who think really critically about the world and want to make it better, it's easy to get burnt out sometimes. And so we envision our Glamp Ground as a place for a customer, a guest who can come to convalesce from that harsh side of life and get perspective on the world and regroup. So we think it will be really mostly couples. We may have a family unit for older children, probably won't be able to allow younger children just for safety reasons. Um, but for couples who really are just those leaders in the world and game changers and nonconformists who need that break and who need to get back in touch with that pulse of that natural rhythm in their life.
So how are you thinking of designing your offer so that it will fit what they will need?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, realizing that every pocket of the planet is unique and has its own amazing vibes and details and feelings that it invokes, we're really trying to stay as true to Maine and the authentic Maine experience that as possible that we possibly can. So we're hoping that using that natural rhythm that emerges from the slow food cooking, from the day and night cycles. So, for instance, we plan to have little observatories in the loft sleeping area of the tree houses where you can just look out at the night sky and view stars and planets and things through a telescope. Again, reiterating that it's nighttime, lots of probably window space so that you can't really just, turn on a bunch of bright lights and stay up all night working or something. It's like, okay, it's night, it's dark, and that puts you back in that circadian rhythm. And so if we can structure the treehouse to help, evoke that experience, if we can offer the cooking things to help evoke that experience, give the guests the opportunity to have the time in nature and give themselves space to take a breath. And I think when you do that, that is a time when you allow new innovations and creativity to flow, and you kind of make space in your brain and in your heart and in your spirit to manifest new ideas and new possibilities. So when I think about how I want to, design this accommodation to accommodate guests, I mean, I take a lot of inspiration from my Grammy. I think there's something about Grammys that is just so timeless and so steadfast and so unchanging that it's extraordinarily comforting and reassuring to be in their presence. My Grammy's no longer with us, but she was quite a woman, a really unique character, and nothing you could say would rattle her because she's like, Grammys have seen it all. And so she had a bright, sunny, like old school Maine sun porch that was just decorated in these, 1960s, like bright yellow and green flowers. And it was so sunny and clean and organized all the time. And she was very, industrious lady that was just very old school, but the sweetest woman you ever met. And I would go to that sun porch and tell her my troubles, and she'd feed me lunch and milk, and I always felt safe and got perspective there. The porch was closed in and high up, and it felt sort of like a treehouse, and I think I draw a lot from those times. So that is a level of comfort that I want to kind of channel to my guests, and I hope that they feel that when they come. So I don't know if I'll be able to translate it. I can only hope that I can communicate that and design the offer around that. But that's the plan.
Yeah, I know you'll be able to communicate that with your guests. Absolutely. Just hearing you talk about it, you kind of transferred me onto that sun porch. And yeah, I felt really reassured just hearing you talk about it. I think that's lovely. And together with your time-lapse movie that you're going to make about the development of your land, and then the story of how you were inspired to produce what you produced from the sun porch, I think that story is going to be really, it's going to be something that will allow your customers to really connect with you before they buy from you. And that's going to be a really nice thing for you to share on your website and in your marketing material, because what a beautiful story. That's such a lovely story. And I feel really kind of warm inside just hearing about it. So yeah, share that. Absolutely. And
okay, great.
yeah, no, do. It's great. If you could share it with a picture of the sun porch as well, then that would be even better. But obviously never an easy thing to do, to share personal pictures. But so what's next for you? What's your plan? What's your next steps?
Yeah, so basically, in line with my timeline, we've really got to secure the site next, and I think we found one. There's a little bit of finesse that's going to be involved. So we did not, when we first started our land search, we said, okay, let's go on MLS, the main listing service for land and houses and things, and we'll just do an advanced search with certain criteria. And we found that too limiting because it just kept sending us to areas, there would be something for sale further than we wanted to be or go. And we said, you know what, let's just manifest what we want. We want to be, we love our farm. We love our home. We'd rather not move from it and buy land and a home somewhere else and have to move. We'd rather just find land near where we already live and farm and the community that we're already embedded in here in Lewiston, Auburn. And so let's find land that's got the right natural features and the right topo and the right, brooks and things that we want, and then just approach the landowners and say, would you sell? And so we have yet to discover if that strategy is going to work, but we've found to back up a little, one of the, this is a fun detail, one of the sort of services that we want to offer is we thought, well, if folks who come to us are big on cooking and food, they're no doubt going to want to go to the best area restaurants and experience, like the best wine bar in the area or the best food in the area. And how could we help facilitate them getting there? Maybe we want to pick a few key partners, like we'll curate it for them. Of course, you can go anywhere you want, but if you want to use our shuttle service, we could provide some kind of shuttle service to these, a few partner restaurants. But a shuttle by nature sounds fast and sounds like something you get in the city. And we thought, how could we do like a unique slow living shuttle? And so randomly, so that's the background. We hadn't answered that question yet. Then randomly, or perhaps serendipitously, when we started looking for the piece of land that we wanted, we found a few pieces of land, and the land was owned by a woman who actually is connected to a living, I didn't even know we had this, and it's only half an hour away from us, a living horse carriage farm. So they have a museum with all these restored horse sleighs for wintertime and horse carriages for the moderate season. And but then they've also tried to educate and share about that history and the role that horse and buggy played in New England and colonial New England. And so to that end, they offer, they have some of their carriages and sleighs that have been restored, and they use them. And I think they actually lease them out. This is what we're investigating now. It's like a service that you can have with them. So we're thinking about having sleigh rides from our tree houses to area, restaurants or wine bars, or carriage rides, or at least to a central point where you can then go to those things. So that all of this came together when we realized that this, did just some internet research on who owns this piece of land and Googled that woman's name and found out that she was on the board of trustees for this carriage farm. We said, what's a carriage farm? So who knows? That may be a point of leverage where when we reach out to her, because it's not, the piece of land we're looking at is not her personal, like there's not a residence on it, it's just land that she owns. Her residence is nearby and on a separate piece. And we're hoping that could be a point of leverage to say, look, this, you obviously care a lot about this nonprofit that does this. We could work with them to help advance their mission of letting, of educating folks about the importance of horse and carriage in New England history, and help it be like a living piece of history along with our glamping accommodation. And maybe that will appeal to her enough that she'll want to sell her land to us. So we have yet to see, but that is the next step, is to really secure that land. And one way or another, we've got a few parcels if that doesn't work out, a running list of our top parcels that we want to have. But once we secure that, then we can move forward with all of our next steps in terms of the site details and just making it happen and building.
Oh, it's really interesting from my perspective in the UK, where there are so many businesses that are looking for land, but they want to buy it every time they want to buy it. And in America, it's much more open to leasing the land and setting up the business in that way. Do you think you'll be aiming to buy it or lease it? Is that something that you've thought about?
It is. So we in our situation will be aiming for an acquisition. We consider doing long-term leases because that is a strategy, like you said, that's employed a lot around here. Hey, you can have a 99-year lease, and so then it's like, well, we'll all be dead by the time it expires. So it sounds great. Let's do that. because people get a little funny about land. It's like it evokes a very territorial feeling sometimes, and people are not always keen to sell it. They'd just rather lease it here, but not always. And for us, I think if we were doing canvas structures or something that could be moved more easily, so that if it didn't work out, or if down the road, I think about our children and our children having children, and I want to set them up for success. And these are very expensive structures. I mean, the tree houses that we would have to build here in Maine would be insulated. I mean, they're essentially like full homes that are just small and up high in a tree. And so they'll be very expensive to build. So with the level of infrastructure investment that we have, it didn't make sense for us to consider a long-term lease. So we are aiming for an acquisition, because I don't want to have that. It just doesn't seem to make good business sense to me to have that kind of heightened financial investment on land that you don't own, and that someone else, has the rights over. So for us, that wasn't the right choice. We're gonna try and go the acquisition route.
Yeah, I can understand that totally, given your situation. But going back quickly to the horse carriage, and you're talking about possibly doing sleigh rides. Is that because you get a lot of snow in Maine?
We do.
Yeah.
So there is basically, 4 to 5 months out of the calendar year where we're covered in snow. Some winters are snowier than others, but we get a lot of it. And so we do envision this being a year-round endeavor, and we really want to honor each season because there is so much outdoors. There is so much fun to be had in Maine in every single season in just very distinct ways. So, you've got snowmobiling and snowshoeing and cross-country skiing. These are all things you can do in the woods in Maine in the wintertime. And then in the summertime, hiking and stream wading, and the possibilities are really endless. And so we really want to cater to each one of those seasons, and the mode of transportation in the winter. If it's not we call them sleds, right? Snowmobiles. If it's not a sled, you're gonna have to have be traveling through the backwoods. So that's the vision.
Oh, it sounds amazing. And I definitely want to come now. You're not going to be able to keep me away. I'm going to be there. And I'm sure there's quite a few people thinking the same thing. So if anyone wants to contact you or find out more, what's the best way they can do that?
Yes. So for anyone who's interested in following our journey, they can find us on Facebook at GlampMe, our username. So for those in Maine, they know that me is the postal abbreviation, but it's just like the word me. GlampMe is our Facebook username, and we're kind of just using that as a house right now to record our journey. So we'll see how it evolves.
Well, I can include all the links in the show notes, which will also be linked to the notes of this episode. So hopefully people will be able to find you easily. And if not, then they can get in touch with me and I'll forward it on. But yeah, check out the show notes, everyone. And I'm sure you will all agree that Karen deserves huge thanks for sharing her journey. Thank you so much, Karen. That is absolutely amazing. And also, see you in the Facebook group soon, sharing your story and your launch date when that happens.
Yeah, that's right. I'll be sure to keep everyone abreast of that. And thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity just to share our journey. And I hope that it can be helpful in some way to others maybe doing the same thing.
Brilliant. See you soon, Karen.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this, got inspired, found it useful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Check out the show notes on inspiredcamping.com/006. And if you want to talk to me more, head over to inspiredcourses.com or my Facebook group. I'd love to have you join me. See you soon.